America's combat mission in Afghanistan may be over, our commitment to Afghanistan and its people endures. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not allow Afghanistan to be used as safe haven for terrorists to attack our nation again. Our forces therefore remain engaged in two narrow but critical missions: training Afghan forces and supporting counterterrorism operations against the remnants of al-Qaeda.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Blackwell, in for Ed Berliner. President Obama's policy reversal leaves U.S. troops in Afghanistan and passes the task of their removal to his successor. The new plan maintains a force of 9,800 through most of 2016, then cutting those down to 5,500 sometime in 2017. Politicians already weighing in. Senator John McCain, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, warned that 5,500 troops would be inadequate to handle both counterterrorism operations and advising Afghan troops. Now, to sift through the right, the wrong, the too soon or too late of the Afghanistan troop question, we are joined by the national security analyst at the Clarion Project, Mauro, as well as former U.S. helicopter pilot, now the senior military advisor for Concerned Veterans of America, Amber Smith. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
All right, Amber, let's get right to it. In his statement, the president says he does not support the idea of an endless war, but he said prolonged American presence in Afghanistan was vital. Did the president make a smart decision today?
Well, what I think we saw today was President Obama's attempt to prevent another outcome like Iraq, where we ended our military operations inside Iraq too soon, all troops left, and the Iraqi government and the Iraqi military wasn't able to fend for itself against ISIS. And I think what President Obama has realized is sort of learned from that mistake and is attempting to do to prevent that mistake in Afghanistan. But what this isn't, it's not a strategy to win. Just keeping that number at 9,800 for the rest of this year and the following year, we're not going to see any changes. It's merely delaying the inevitable of the outcome of Afghanistan.
Well, Ryan, let's talk about that 9,800 number when it comes to troop levels. The president called it a modest but meaningful expansion. Will 9,800 troops get the job done?
If current trends continue, then no, because what you're seeing is the highest levels of violence in Afghanistan since 2001. We are seeing ISIS come in and compete with the Taliban and even taking some of their support away and absorbing it. But at the same time, we also have to be mindful of the certain amount of progress that's happened in Afghanistan that often goes unreported. For example, the fact that the Taliban took Kunduz got a lot of attention. But what didn't get a lot of attention is the fact that the Afghan security forces were able to retake it with limited U.S. support. So it's not just about keeping back the terrorists and stopping things from getting worse. It's about preserving hard-fought-for gains.
You know, Amber, you served in Afghanistan, and many of the gains you and your fellow soldiers gained, at some point they have been sacrificed because of what's happened over the last several years. Let's talk about what the Taliban, they seem to be more spread out. The president today called it a security situation, very fragile. What should be our strategy as far as helping out those Afghan forces so, again, they can have more victories inside their own country?
Well, the Taliban does have a stronger presence and more influence now than they've had in the past 14 years, and that's due to the drawdown inside Afghanistan, probably prior to the Afghan security forces being able to sort of take over that combat role. But unfortunately, the reality of the war on the ground inside Afghanistan is that as it stands, they're not ready. Regardless of people wanting to prop up the Afghan military, they're doing a great job and they're trying extremely hard. But the reality is they're not going to be able to defeat the Taliban as it stands today. That's the reason that the Afghan president continues to ask for U.S. support and U.S. troop and more of a presence and leadership in taking that fight to the Taliban and to al-Qaeda. But we've seen from President Obama of him not wanting to sort of insert that combat role again back inside Afghanistan, that 9,800 troop presence, all that's really going to be is we're going to see higher levels of troops at Bagram Air Base, sort of north east of Kabul, and then Jalalabad Air Base out east near the Pakistan border, and then Kandahar as well down south. Because those are key components to ensuring that those counterterrorism operations are going to happen. And so I think that's why we're seeing the higher levels at the air bases, and then as well as the advise and assist and equip role.
You know, Ryan, expectations and resources are often tied together. In this particular case, we've talked about more troops. But what is it going to take to get the job done? And specifically, if we look at this in maybe 2 years from now, how will we gauge whether Afghanistan was a success?
The best way to do that is to look at how the Afghan security forces are performing, because the mission here isn't for an occupation of Afghanistan or for the U.S. troops to remain there forever fighting the Taliban, and it's also not to extinguish every single terrorist. The objective here is to make it so that the Afghans can increasingly take care of their own country and prevent the Taliban, ISIS, and other groups from having a safe haven. They'll still pop up. There will still be incidents where they come in and they overwhelm Afghan security forces. But the benchmark for success is whether, when that happens, the Afghan security forces can punch back and be successful. And we are getting there. That's an important part of this equation, that this isn't just destined to fail.
Well, we want to hear from the Secretary of Defense. Ashton Carter also weighed in on troop levels. So let's hear the Pentagon's perspective.
I'm grateful that the President was willing to, in fact, eager to make an adjustment in a plan that was, after all, over a year old in light of circumstances which constantly change. That's the nature of this kind of conflict, the nature of this kind of development.
Well, Amber, this is going to be a big political football over the course of the next 16 months before the general election. And I just wanted to ask your opinion. What are you listening for when these candidates speak, when they're at debates, when they're on the stump? What do you want them to say about Afghanistan and Iraq?
Well, I would like to see them talk about a strategy that is geared towards winning. We should never send our military into a conflict or a war zone without the intent of winning whatever it is we're sending them in to do. They need to have a clearly defined mission, and including an end state. And right now what we've been seeing in Iraq and what we're now seeing in Afghanistan is sort of just more of the same, just more of a containment for the next couple of years, instead of saying, look, we're going to give our military the rules of engagement to get the job done, that is in the best interest of our national security and the safety and security of our troops. And this is how we're going to do it. Because I think the ambiguity surrounding mission intent and mission success over the past 7 years has been not a good thing for our troops at all.
Ryan, I want to talk about mission success in Iraq. It does not appear that there are very many similarities right now in the two situations, in that the Iraqi army has not really come to the forefront. And there's also that a miscalculation looking into the potential of the Iraqi government. What are some of the challenges that we're seeing in Iraq that we're really not necessarily seeing in Afghanistan?
Well, for one, Iranian influence. In Afghanistan, Iran is paying Taliban terrorists somewhere around $580 a month to kill American and Afghan security personnel. So Iran is active in Afghanistan, but it's much greater in Iraq. And as Iranian influence increases, so does that of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. One extreme feeds the other. And so our strategy in Iraq has to be to break away the influence of the Iranians on the Iraqi security forces and say to the Iraqis, it's either us or them. And in the past, when we've done that, they've chosen us.
Amber, how many troops on the ground do you think it would take to make sure that we're adequately training the Afghan military and at the same time doing a better job against ISIL and ultimately winning this war?
Well, look, if our singular role inside Afghanistan was to train and equip or to train and assist the Afghan military, that's what we're doing. We're not failing in terms of training the Afghan military. We have the best trainers in the world, and we're training them. Where the problem lies is that they don't have the leadership. They don't have that fundamental foundation of an Afghan government that they need to sustain those military operations, a lot of the Afghan military soldiers, they are illiterate. A lot of them are, and we've had programs where we've tried to, help these soldiers, but a lot of them, the attrition rate is incredibly high, and it's because of this Taliban influence, and they can only work for so long. This isn't a conventional war. When the Taliban comes into these towns and threatens their families and goes after, these personal components of their lives, a lot of people would, they're not going to continue on that front. And so I think the reality is that there is a long way to go in Afghanistan, and they're not going to be able to do it without U.S. leadership, unfortunately.
All right, Amber, it is a long way to go, and we appreciate the comments. Mauro and Amber Smith right here on The Hardline. We're coming right back on Newsmax TV.